Episode 62. We see Cosmo standing on a conveyor belt passing by other similar looking people to her on conveyor belts. At first glance, she made me think of androids going past conveyor belts, since she seemed like a lifeless android being rolled off a factory line one after the other, and the fact that some of her people look so similar to her didn't help. Cosmo says in a flashback that she was playing a game and forgot what day it was. And someone taunts her that they're all used to her daydreaming by now, which annoys her. Cosmo calls a tree her mother, when everyone like her looks and acts nothing like a tree. So that's dumb. She talks to the tree and we don't hear her response, and Cosmo's sister says that she's sure of her mother's thought. So that's an awful mother if they can't even really hear her responses. And she tells the audience that her people think they might be traveling in space forever. Then we see that Cosmo's spaceship kept getting damaged, and her flashback stops. There's no way she doesn't have PTSD. I was always suspicious of that since she keeps thinking of her past, and she's so scared of the metrics. This is to try to make her more sympathetic, I understand, but she's not interesting enough as a person for me to forgive her for what a downer she is. What is her hobby? Cosmo angsts about how she misses her family again. This is repetitive. We don't need to be told every single individual time that she's angsty about the same thing over and over. That's realistic for someone with PTSD, but it's still not enjoyable to have that much focus on it. Tails flies down to a cave while Knuckles is climbing down to it. They're doing this to try to find a Chaos Emerald. Again, why can't this be Mobius? Cosmo accidentally puts her hand on a button for no reason, just to force the ground to open beneath her feet. Tails pushes the inconvenience away so she won't get crushed by rocks, and I already knew he'd get bruised in the head because I had a picture of him like that for years. It's very impressive that they actually drew him with a red mark on his head, which looks really realistic, and even said he was dizzy. Tails says he lost their connection, and Cosmo at least apologizes to him. After all, it's her fault she's in this mess. Though he wouldn't have progressed with the plot up to this point if she didn't do that. Where'd she get that bandage? She says it's better to be safe than sorry as she bandages his head, and he arbitrarily says she doesn't need to do that. So I guess it makes sense that she'd always keep a bandage around in her clothing just in case, since she's such a worrywart. It wasn't necessary that Tails blushed at this. She was just being a good friend. Tails thinks he should upgrade the communicator so that it wouldn't break contact when they're underground. And as he keeps talking about how he could upgrade his device, Cosmo ignores him to angst about how her mother would have known what to do. Great chemistry there. A really good girlfriend for Tails would have actually listened to his technobabble and understood it, and been really excited about it. Too bad the only girl gadgeteer in Sonic is Wave the Swallow. It's really disappointing that this is going to be the only love interest Tails will ever be successful with for even a second, because she just doesn't have anything in common with him, even if she is compassionate to him when she bothers to pay attention to him. If they're going to have these two ship together, it's common sense to make her just as much into science as he is. Tails says the emerald is somewhere in this Metrix complex, and they sneak around the hallway. And I'm reminded of Sad EM with how they had to sneak past the robot instead of destroying it. The Tails I know would just spin dash robots and defeat them. But this is X-Tails. Has he ever spin dashed through anything? Though I'm way more willing to forgive Tails for having a weak spin dash since he's not a spinning buzzsaw and can't move at super speed. They see the emerald, and Cosmo is scared because they're making a huge amount of fake Chaos Emeralds. Tails sees some strange code he can't decipher, and Cosmo reads the code on it, and she says she's not familiar with the more technical data. Tails thinks that she helped a lot when she didn't say anything important enough that I could remember enough to mention it. She lampshades that she got them into this mess, and Tails says they wouldn't have discovered all this without her. That's a good point. He tells her to get the real emerald when a Metric shows up, and Cosmo turns a wheel and gets the emerald, and Tails pulls the pipe wire out of the socket and electrocutes the Metrix, being a competent badass in a way that's creative and unexpected, So just when I was insulting him in my head earlier for not making a ray gun for himself so he could actually defend himself, he reassured me. He still should have a ray gun though, he just got lucky here. Tails says he knew something was funny about these fireflies. They're tiny robots powered by Chaos Emeralds. Cosmo says he's a genius, but that doesn't justify him somehow knowing they're robots. But he blushes at the compliment anyways. Cosmo says the light of the Chaos Emerald reminds her of how her mother reassured her and she felt like it was loving. Tails gives Cosmo boring exposition on the Chaos Emeralds and how they work positively and negatively. She says that she's not worthy to touch the emerald and tells him to take it away because her soul is clogged up with nothing but sadness and hatred. She cries about how the metrics left her all alone and lampshades that, logically, she'd only bring disaster if she used the emerald. That's true. Tails gets knocked down by the metrics, and Cosmo tells him to forget the emerald and take off as he's threatened by overly menacing looking snake robots. Tails stands up to them while standing still instead of flying around them to protect himself. Finally, he starts flying, and his tails push over the metrics. He yells at her to get the emerald, and it gets grabbed by the metric's tentacle. Tails' communicator gets called by Sonic, and Sonic spin dashes in through the ground and epically ricochets off all of the robots to save Tails, because of course he needed bailing out. And after a robot asks who dares help the enemy, Amy is epic by saying that she dares, and jumps in with a hammer. I love that the fights are finally of a decent length now. It helps that there's a lot more robots to deal with at once, so it's okay that they all die in one hit here. All the robots get beaten, and Tails has a really cheesy line that nothing but good can come when you help your friends. And Sonic has thrown a Chaos Emerald, which he uses to cause a white light to happen. And the animators lazily cut away from the robot's destruction to flash forward to the heroes being somewhere else. At least Cosmo has a unique talent finally. She's able to translate the metrics code for them, and it was nice of X-Amy to call her a brilliant translator. After some overly lightheartedness where the heroes are happy, Knuckles arbitrarily asks where they came from, just to force the heroes to laugh at him when he comes out of the ground. I hate every time he gets mocked like this. But why does he keep staying around his friends when they treat him like crap? That's just begging for him to betray them. But he'd be even more unsympathetic if he told us that he was siding with Eggman not because he trusted him and wanted him to be good, but because he wanted to get back at his friends. But that would have made much more logical sense. This episode was about Tails and Cosmo spending time alone together to go find an emerald underground, so they could show off how they interact that way. The results are disappointing. Cosmo ignores what Tails says about his inventions to angst and worry like Shadow or Sally when she's the most stressed, rather than being interested in Tails' technobabble and properly engage in a conversation with them. She just angsts and feels sorry for herself and apologizes for arbitrarily pressing a button to get them further in the cave, even though they needed her to do that to get them the emerald at all. It was cool that she could be a code translator, so now she's actually worthwhile as a teammate finally. And it was sweet of her to bandage Tails' head, and it was really impressive that they actually drew Tails with a red bump on his head to show that he got hurt. But the ideal girlfriend for Tails would be just as much of a gadgeteer genius as he is, and be just as interested in his technobabble as he is. They'd have an actually great chemistry. If Cosmo married Tails, she'd be ignoring him while he talked about his inventions in science and wouldn't be helping with the engineering at all. And she'd just be sad that he was doing that instead of spending most of his time with her. I can't imagine him keeping any wife or girlfriend when he spends most of his time as an engineer, and would make them feel neglected. At least that's how I imagine Tails anyways. In the show, he's just with his friends most of the time, doing nothing. So Cosmo will get all the time with him she wants, as long as they're freedom fighting. When he's an adult, he's going to be engineering most of the time without her. Or maybe she'll help with the really simple stuff. If he's lucky. It really is a shame that this is Tails' only option in any particular canon for a genuine girlfriend. And we all know what fucking happens to her in the end. At least Fiona was part of the Brain Trust, which was full of engineers. so it could have been assumed that she understood their technobabble and was interested in it. But sadly, she was way too old for Tails to be interested in him, and got derailed into betraying him in the end. Both times, he ended up being heartbroken. It's a shame that Cosmo is the only girl who's really been given to him as a girlfriend, because she doesn't share his interests at all. She's just bland and generic as a love interest, because she doesn't share any of his engineering talent and passion. The closest she has to that is that she can read and translate the metrics language, and even then she's got trouble translating their more technical terms. She's nothing like him. So while they are happy together, he could do better than her. At least in theory, because she's the best he'll ever get. So people ship the two because they've got literally no other option. Wade the Swallow was evil and way too old for him, just like Fiona. But both of them have more in common with him than she does. Tails has always had the worst of luck with the girls, and that's just not fair. It just seems spiteful to me. I can understand supporting an official couple, because regardless of whether they're the ideal couple, you just want to see the characters have sweet moments together, and achieve their major goal by having a relationship after all that build-up. That's why people support Sonic and Sally. That's an appeal I can find in this ship myself. I can't wait for them to get together. And at least these two aren't constantly arguing with each other, with Sally, I mean Cosmo, constantly saying, "No, you can't do this, you can't be brave because it's too dangerous." Oh wait, she did do that. I just remembered, she told Tails to abandon the Emerald when she was surrounded by robots. She had no faith in him whatsoever, even though both of them can fly. To be fair, that didn't stop the robot from grabbing Tails in the air. He still needed Sonic to bail him out. I'm confused about how Sonic found exactly where Tails is. I guess he had a GPS to it, so it's a good thing they can hack into the Wi-Fi of this planet to figure out where the exact coordinates of the communicator is with the internet. Anyways, Cosmo is just Sally without the tsundere. Every time I could think of a Sally trait that she never showed, she ended up showing it herself at least once. Even a stubborn independent streak. The only thing not Sally about her is that she's not a tsundere who tries to look badass, calm, and collected. And instead, she's just worried all the time, being a constant downer. She's Sally if she didn't even try to seem brave and respectable, and instead was always showing what a worrywart she really is. And it was played for laughs how physically weak she was. It's not her fault she's like that though, she can't change that, and her friends probably feel sorry for her. So it makes sense that they don't insult her and complain about how angsty she is. But Shadow gets way too much flack for being angsty, when he's not nearly as angsty as Cosmo is. Shadow just remembers his past, and complains about Maria dying occasionally. But Cosmo is way more of a nervous worrywart who's constantly remembering the metrics. But I guess she totally gets away with it because she's a girl, even though Cosmo is actually annoying about it with how repetitive it is. That's fair.